Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bob Wood, and I'm proud to host this evening along with our board and the rest of the members of Agenda Alexandria. We are very proud of the program we're bringing to you tonight. We're very proud of you attending. This is a great program focused on ending hunger in Alexandria. We're ending hunger tonight at the table. Hopefully you like the food. That's what we want to make sure you got a bite of. We are glad to welcome you. We'd like to not only welcome members, we have some folks up front who are doing program only, maybe members themselves, and we invite you to love the program and join the program. So we're watching you. We put you right up front. We are going to make several announcements up front. Of course, thanking you for the food that you brought. Great day after, or 2 days after Thanksgiving, we kind of paired it up knowing that that would be very much in the light of the season. So we're thankful for the food that people brought. It'll be good, put to good use. And we, in fact, are going to highlight a lot of the programs tonight that are not only here, but also in some of the surrounding areas, Arlington in particular. I think we've got a good program that we'll all learn from. On your table, you'll find some handouts which indicate the programs that exist in Alexandria and in the region. Educational. Have a chance to take a look at it, and they're for you to take home and possibly look at and spread the news to your friends. We also have a variety of other items on the table. You'll notice there's a little pad with a pencil and a pen that'll be available for you to ask questions when the panel concludes its remarks. A couple important announcements up front. We will not only next program in January, we will not only present the program but disrupt. It's about the disruptive economy, and that program will be on January 22nd. We do not have a program in December. The disruptive economy will be held in a different location than this location. When we started the program this year, we all got together as a board and said, okay, what are some of the things we'd like to do? Adding variety, adding not only to the program, but to the location where we have the program, with great affection and thanks for our home here. But we want to have programs, we decided, at least 2 different locations within the city, move it around, make sure it's available to all of our members, and thankful that we're next going to hold it at the Alexandria Renew in the Carlisle area of Old Town. That's that area with the soccer field nearby, down there next to the Beltway. But we will publish a map, we will publish reminders, and you will just almost get tired of us on Facebook and on email, send you a notice on how to get there. We're looking forward to the program on the disruptive economy, the economy that's taking place all around us, whether it be food trucks or the Uber or B2B or a variety of economic models that are taking place in the city. We thought we'd offer a closer look at that. I would point out that our new facility that we're going to use next time has free parking, and as mentioned, we will send out information on how to get there. It's on 1800 Limerick Street, Alexandria, Virginia. I'll need the map myself. I do know where it's at. Another special announcement is to thank our teachers and students from T.C. Williams. They are here. Let's give them a hand. So you can find this entire program on YouTube. Our programs are posted on YouTube, so we keep a running list. Our programs are remarkable. If you're a member and have not yet gotten the booklet, which not only lists all the programs we've had in the history of Agenda Alexandria, but a lot of good information about our sponsors, which we thank very much, but also other information about Alexandria I think you'll find very interesting. I would point out that our students here participated in They won over their friends at the Carlisle House on Halloween Scary Film Contest. They used their audiovisual skills, their ability to set up, tell a story, and present it. And they actually won the competition, and they're included now in some of the inside and outside shots of Carlisle House. We're thankful that they're with us tonight, as usual. And their teacher, Velma Zefren and Ben Lyons, were there with the students during the competition. Let's give them another hand. I don't know, Donna, did we have any elected officials come in? I might have missed them. Allison, how are you? We'd like to welcome our mayor, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming, Allison. We also have, I mentioned earlier, our sponsors who are with us. A couple to highlight: our Hoffheimer Security and Captain Token the Magician. Thank you for being steady and regular sponsor. Thank you for being with us tonight. Give him a hand. Gant Redmond probably will be here, always a steady partner with us. I have to check around the corner. But we have a host of other partners as well. I'd like to recognize Synergy Home Care. Janet, thank you for your support as ever. Thank you very much. Woods Landscaping and Sprinkler Service. I'd like to say it was me, but it's Jim Wood. Thank you for that. Yes, indeed. And Jim is here, not here, but we are represented well, I would offer. And the Zebra newspaper, providing great coverage. Check the Zebra out. They do a lot of good work in the community and with our program. Thank you for being with us. You're probably on already, pictures have already been taken of all of you. Our advertisers in the larger ads you'll find in the booklets. We thank you, Richard McGuire. Our corporate sponsors, our Senior Services of Alexandria, thank you very much, and including Meals on Wheels and Hope Nelson. The tables back there highlight that, Alive, Senior Services of Alexandria, and Meals on Wheels, and the Hope Nelson. They are here to provide information and answer questions. I would sure like to have you take a look back there and look at something that's called the Little Free Pantry. It's the beta version. Looks like one of the free libraries you'll find in other towns, in our town as well. In it, you'll find a certain number of items, food stock and items. It's meant to be on the corner in the areas where people have need. It's called the Little Free Pantry. That's the first of its kind. You can say you saw it first, and you may see it soon on a corner near you. Thank you for bringing that. And a good idea, your idea. Thank you very much. We also have with us a couple other things to mention. Thanks to the Hermitage as ever and our host at Bittersweet, our caterer. It's never too late, by the way, to support Agenda Alexandria, to purchase a membership and find out other ways to support Agenda Alexandria. Please not only visit the registration table, but check out the remarkable website that we thank members of the board for putting together and doing a good job in curating that website. Take a look at agendaalexandria.org. It's a great website. By the way, speaking of the board, could I ask the board members to stand up, please? Give me a hand. Thank you very much. This is a participatory model. You'll find all of them. Thank you very much. You'll find them included in putting the programs together, but also offering services that our members are looking to use. Thank you very much. Particularly mention Katie Cook, Jenny Franco, Rosalind Bovey, and with that said, they helped put the program together, and I would now like to invite our panel to the table up front, and we'll start the program, continue to eat. I'm going to grab and bite myself. Thank you again for being here tonight. Thank you, new people who came first time tonight. Anyone here, first time Agenda Alexandria? All right, take a look at that. We welcome you and thank you for being with us. Your ideas are important, your energies certainly welcome here with Agenda Alexandria. So John, you got them under control? All right, good. You can carry this.
Well, I'm going to stand right here with it first, and then I'll sit down. How's that? Good evening, everyone. Good to see you. I'm John Porter. I'm the President and CEO at Act for Alexandria, and it's been a fun evening because I've seen some people I haven't seen in a number of years since your kids graduated from T.C. Williams a few years ago in some cases. But it's really great to see the turnout this evening, particularly on this issue and particularly at this time of the year. I do remind everyone, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, this time of the year is a time that we do think about others a lot, and we do a number of things to honor others and help those in need. I remind you that those that are hungry, those that are in need throughout the year, and we hope that you will stay involved with the organizations with which you're involved to continue to support those folks during the year. Tonight, the issue is hunger, and we are pleased to talk a little bit about hunger. I think when you think of Alexandria, the word hunger and people in need of food might not come to mind, or might not necessarily come to mind. But it is an issue for our community just as it is an issue nationally. In 2015, the last time we have statistics available, there were approximately 42 million people in the United States that were suffering from hunger. About 1 in 7 people were suffering from hunger. About 12% of the families in our country were going to bed at night not necessarily well fed. And 1 in 4 children in 2015 were going to bed each night without having a good meal and being hungry at the time. In Alexandria, we may think a little bit differently. If you look at any statistics nationally, if you look at any statistics that are available nationally about Alexandria, you will see that we have one of the highest median incomes in the country. We have one of the highest median house prices in the country. And most folks would say that in many ways, we are very well off, both on the financial side and certainly on the resources side. At the same time, if you go to the school system's website, the Alexandria City Public School System's website, you will notice that 60% of the children in Alexandria, give or take, and that changes each year, are eligible for free or reduced lunch, which means that they are at or below various poverty indicators in the country, and many of them may go hungry at night. Someone used to complain before I left the school system, after my tenure at TC, I became the assistant superintendent for operations. And one of the things I had to do was call school off on snow days. And so I was either loved or hated, depending on who you were at the time, whether you were a teacher or a kid. But more importantly, people didn't understand that many times we would not close school, or we would try not to close school, because we knew that for many of the kids, the only good meal they were going to get that day was lunch and possibly the breakfast also. And so it was a last decision that we made regarding that. And I know our mayor, Allison Silverberg, and I talked a couple of times about this issue, particularly when, I think it was a couple of years ago, when we had some really long, snowy weeks, and wondering about those kids and how they might eat and what we might do to do that and might be able to do to help them. The issue of hunger became even more pronounced a few years ago, and what we're going to do tonight is try to present a progression of what has taken place for the last few years, and then answer questions that you may pose through writing those notes and sending them up to the dais. But a few years ago, there's a group in town called the Alexandria Council of Human Service Organizations. There are a number of nonprofit leaders in here that are members. The council was formed in 2006 in cooperation with the city and Act for Alexandria to address human services needs in Alexandria, to collaborate on needs, to talk about those things where we might be able to make a difference, to prevent duplication, to maybe save a little bit of time, energy, and money, and hopefully better address the issues that were in front of us. One of those issues that came to pass a few years ago was the issue of hunger in Alexandria. And as this became more pronounced as an issue, the Alexandria Council of Human Service Organizations, in fact, a little offshoot of that group, began to meet to try to determine what we might do to try to help address this issue in Alexandria. But first, we figured we needed to know a little bit more about what the issue really was. In order to address it, we need to know what the issue was for Alexandria, where it was, and how we therefore might better be able to move forward to address the issue. So there were a number of us that got together and tried to determine how we might better determine what the needs were in this arena. And it so happened that there was a woman named Tricia Rogers. Many of you know Tricia. She's with the Northern Virginia Health Foundation. She was seeking a grant from Kaiser Permanente, I believe. And I'd look at Alan because Alan knows for sure. And we decided that we would like to commission a study of hunger in the community, which ended up with a report being provided, which was then presented far and wide in many, many ways. And so that was kind of the beginning, and we've come really seriously a long way. I've been in Alexandria all my life, and I will tell you that this issue got more traction and got more response more quickly than any issue I've seen in the community. And it certainly is an issue of importance and prominence for each of us in the sense of something that we need to address. So with that, I'm going to sit down at the table. I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves sort of in an order. We have a little program planned. Alan's going to talk about the study and what that meant and where it took us. Diane Charles from Alive is going to talk about where we are now. And then Charlie Meng from Arlington is going to talk about the issue in a little bit more of a regional way and what Arlington has been doing and what Arlington does. We all work together on this issue, even though our communities are a little distinct. So I'm going to ask each to take a couple of minutes and introduce themselves and then speak to the topic before we get to questions and answers. So Alan?
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I appreciate you all being here for this very important issue. It's important to us, and I'm glad it's all important to you as well. I am Alan Lomax. I have lived in this city since for 40 years now. I've seen a lot of changes, and I actually worked for the federal government for a number of years evaluating the efficiency and effectiveness of federal programs. So actually this kind of fell in kind of a bailiwick of mine as well as we got into this area. I retired several years ago. And actually my aspect of this is I chair the Partnership for Healthier Alexandria. And one of the key areas of being healthy happens to be access to healthy and to food and healthy food. So therefore, the partnership took a major lead in this initiative based upon the discussion that was happening at the Alexandria Council of Human Services Organization. And John mentioned that Tricia Rogers was the driving force actually behind it from both her position as chair of the Alexandria Childhood BC Action Network, which was a working group at that time of the partnership, and also in her position with the Northern Virginia Health Foundation. So we did actually, after some discussion, say we needed to have this study. Tricia was able to identify Kaiser Permanente is willing to provide a grant to us in order to do this study. I want to mention that, so we formed a steering committee to actually lay out the research questions, lay out our needs, and to hire a consultant and guide that consultant so the consultant would know what we needed and what we wanted as far as an assessment in order to move us forward in the city. So I want to mention that other group representatives from that steering committee consisted of ACT for Alexandria, Alexandria Department of Community and Human Services, the Alexandria Health Department, Alive at that time actually Diane's previous director there, the director of Alive, Ken Nazer was on there. The Northern Virginia Health Foundation, of course the partnership, and then Volunteer Alexandria. You guys actually, you may say, wow, Volunteer Alexandria, but you will see that a large component of successes and actually where you need to go in the future relies a lot on volunteers and them being there and being dependable and achieving a lot of the outcomes. So we actually hired a consultant. We went through the process. We laid out the questions, and basically a couple of key things that came out of that assessment. They actually consisted of such things as, well, there's a lot of fragmentation among the emergency food system in the city. In fact, it wasn't even a system, it was pods of services being provided. Very important systems, very important people, very important programs, but they were all kind of doing things on their own. And for the most part, nobody knew what the emergency food system structure looked like in the city of Alexandria. Nobody had ever assessed it. Nobody was able to actually gather the information. So it was hard actually to maximize the value of that network without knowing that it was, without it being a network and relying upon each other. And they hardly ever talked to each other in a unified focus just on providing food to the people in the city of Alexandria who needed it, and also to identify what were some of their priorities and how do you together work on those priorities as opposed to individuals. The other thing that came about was there were a number of people who were eligible to receive Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, which is the former food stamps. They were eligible, but they weren't signing up. So therefore, it actually meant that people who had an opportunity to get food stamps, to get food, weren't seeking that opportunity for any number of reasons. One, because hours weren't available. It was too cumbersome to do it, a whole host of other things. In addition, it got to be, are we providing the right food? Are we getting the food that's available in the city? You know, one of the major things that came out of this early on was that our farmers market, particularly at Old Town, at the end of the day, the farmers are taking the food back to their farms or disposing of it. So actually, there's a program called Gleaning, which this assessment came out and said, you know, if you started a gleaning program, that it would actually get a lot of those fruits and vegetables back into the system in Alexandria rather than the farmers taking it back, which they were very happy to get rid of. We also got the farmers market there in 4 Mile Run and then later at Old Town Market to accept food stamps, which was a major initiative. And in addition to that, there was a double dollar program. So if there was funding that was provided by some private individuals that allowed that if people spent $10, they could actually buy $20 worth of food by having tokens that were provided for them. It was identified that it would be good to expand that throughout the city when we could. The other thing was recognized that in order to have a cohesive group, that we actually needed somebody to be a coordinator of that, whether it was a part-time or full-time person. In addition, we really needed somebody to reach out and bring everybody together and reach out to more national efforts going on and actually provide more education to other people. Another thing that came out of the study was we didn't have a lot of good data about what the picture looked like in the city of Alexandria as far as hunger and what emergency food was being provided to the people in Alexandria who needed it. Some places collected their own types of data. Some people collected very little data. And so it was really hard to take a snapshot of what existed in Alexandria as far as what was the need and what was being provided to address that need and were there gaps in that need. And finally, it was basically, we needed to develop an agenda of food hardships and ways to address that in the city of Alexandria. So overall, there were 14 recommendations that came out. One of the other things that came out were two needs. People were saying, based upon surveys, et cetera, that in order to actually provide more food to people in need in the city of Alexandria, we needed more space to store it. And when you got more space to store it, you needed more shelving in order to put the food on. And when you got that, you needed more refrigerators and more refrigeration. So, taking all of this, I will say one of the first things, the report came out in July of 2014. Ken had already been talking to several ministers in their congregations. So actually, we had 8 ministers headed by Chris Furr at First Christian, who called them together, and they sat down with us and said, what's your report going to say, and how can we help? And they immediately jumped forward and said, we're going to take a leadership role in this. As a matter of fact, in September of that year, there was a Hunger Awareness Day in the city of Alexandria for a weekend, where churches, congregations, synagogues all talked about, from Friday on through Sunday, about hunger in the city of Alexandria, and those the faith-based community came together to talk about what they were going to do actually to help address some of the recommendations of the report. Now, it's really very helpful that at the time, we have great city staff. And at that time, one of the people we were chatting with was Tom Gates, who was an assistant city manager here in the city of Alexandria. And he said, what do you guys really need to advance quickly? And we said, we need storage space. And at that time, Alive had part of an old printing plant. They were on Payne Street in Alexandria, which occurred because they were placed in there when their other place was broken into many, many years ago that City Council stepped forward. So, but on the other side of that first floor were old printers that nobody were using, and they were just sitting there. So he said, so what do you need? And we said, we need you to get rid of the printers so we can move forward. He actually went back that afternoon. He sat down with Deborah Collins, another assistant city manager who's now a deputy city manager. They got together. They immediately got back on the phone to me and a couple other people, said, okay, how important is this? And will you work with General Services on this as well? And we said yes. So with that occurring in actually October of 2014, remember the report came out in July. In October of 2014, those printers were being moved out. We started having conversations with General Services and talking about what do we need if we wanted to get the food, get the center, get the old printing plant expanded and move forward. And they were excellent. The General Services, Jeremy McPike, worked with us and his staff. We started talking about what type of electrical connections did you need, plumbing, et cetera, what was needed in order to pass health department inspections, et cetera, what type of MOU, what type of internet connection, et cetera. And they came up with a price tag for us. And at that time, actually, we went to City Council. The first two people we went to were Del Pepper, Councilwoman Del Pepper, and Mayor Ewell, to have that conversation. To initial conversation, we also, right almost simultaneously, we had the conversation with the current Mayor, Allison Silverberg, And we actually started having the conversations with council, what we needed. Council, the first estimate that came up was relatively high, but not so much for what we were doing. But General Services actually worked hard and brought in an architect that said this is what we could do if you actually do it, and really went from a user's need viewpoint. And so I will remind you again, the report came out in July of 2014. In May of 2015, when City Council passed their budget for the next fiscal year, they included $55,000 for renovation of the old printing plant, the full floor there, in order to actually create the Alexandria Food Center, with the idea that Alive would manage it. Alive would be using it, but Alive would also manage it for other organizations to be using. One of the other things that was really important in this report was all those fragmented organizations came together and started coming together, recognizing the value of working together, and actually created the Hunger-Free Alexandria Committee. And Diane will brief you a lot on that in a few minutes. Another thing that actually happened is that what the report says, we needed more funding and needed to reach out to funders, which we hadn't done before. So actually we created a Hunger-Free Alexandria donation fund at ACT. We also worked with Whole Foods, and Whole Foods actually that first year provided pallets and pallets of food and some funding. In addition, they came back a second year and actually provided more funding. And I do want to make a plug that if please fill up your gas tank between now and the end of Thursday at Yates Automotive, because for this month they will be donating 2 cents a gallon. I have filled up my car 4 times there at Yates Automotive. I've actually been driving a little bit more. Probably hasn't been environmentally sound, but actually for fundraising, it's been good. So there's been those factors too. And one of the other things is we do need at least a part-time coordinator. And actually the value of that came about. So there's a program called the Mission Continues, which brings in a veteran who is transitioning back out of the service, and will provide help to communities, provide their expertise and knowledge to help them advance. Nathan, would you stand up for a moment, please? Yeah, you need to stand up. Come on, Nathan. So, last April, Nathan actually applied. The Volunteer Alexandria for the Hunger-Free Alexandria Committee actually filed an application, paperwork seeking a fellow. Nathan applied. Nathan came on board in April, and from April to October, really brought us into ship shape as the process went through. So Nathan demonstrated how important it was to us. Unfortunately for us, Nathan's fellowship ended. Fortunately for us, though, Nathan was hired by Senior Services of Alexandria, so it's very good for Senior Services of Alexandria, and we just need to find somebody who is at least half as good as Nathan in order to move forward. So that pretty much captures a lot of it. So after that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Diane.
All right.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you, Alan. And I appreciate all of you being here and your interest in this. And I'm going to highlight primarily Alive's work as well as the Hunger-Free Alexandria. But in preparing for this, I understand that some people aren't familiar with Alive, so I do want to kind of weave that into my remarks as well, and giving you a little bit of history about me. I've worked in the nonprofit or government arena throughout my 35 years here in Alexandria, and including Volunteer Alexandria when it was called the Alexandria Volunteer Bureau, and SCAN of Northern Virginia. And I worked for council member, vice mayor, and Mayor Carrie Donnelly. But every place I've worked in Alexandria, I've always interfaced with Alive. So when I was at Volunteer Alexandria, we would coordinate 2 times a year a major food drive with Alive at all the grocery stores, and literally the Alive trucks would drive around and pick up the food at the grocery stores. When I was at SCAN, we worked with the Alive House Shelter, and the women at that shelter would come to the Alive parenting classes. When I worked with Mayor Donnelly, between the Alive Child Development Center walkathon or anything to do with the financial assistance Alive provided and food assistance, I was very in tune with that. Just before I came to Alive, I had the opportunity to work for a year in Congressman Jim Moran's district office, and even there I was steering constituents to Alive's food program. So, and since Alive is affiliated with 44 faith-based congregations, and my church has been engaged all of Alive's life, I've definitely known of Alive my whole time here in Alexandria. So when I came to Alive 3 years ago, it sort of felt like the capstone of my career. And to define Alive, it is the largest private social safety net here in the city of Alexandria, serving our neighbors in need. And we do that through food, which you're going to hear a lot about our food program here in a minute, shelter, emergency help, and education. And rooted in community, we are 44 faith-based organizations, over 900 volunteers, and over 5,000 partners and supporters. And I am going to focus my remarks on food, but again, to make sure everybody's on the same page about where sort of Alive comes from and what all we do in addition to food, I did want to mention our other programs. We have a financial assistance program where we help folks with low-income households with rent, utilities, and medical assistance to help prevent crises, sometimes preventing eviction and keeping folks in their apartments. We also have a shelter, a Live House. It's a transitional shelter program for women and provides individualized case management for homeless mothers and their children. And we operate a nationally accredited full-day, year-round preschool, the Alive Child Development Center, and it's for low-income working families, providing a sliding fee scale and tuition assistance. And then finally, we also have a furniture and housewares program where we take in donated furniture from folks here in Alexandria and get it out to low-income families that are often just moving out of a shelter or transitional housing. So, so that's kind of, you can see Alive's work is in the low-income community and helping our neighbors in need. Before I get into the food program, I do want to share some statistics and some facts, and that I think build on what John and Alan have talked about historically, but provide the foundation of why we're talking about this tonight. In our city, we have over 13,500 people who live in poverty. We do have the highest percentage of children living in poverty in Northern Virginia, around 14.5%. 1 in 5 Alexandrians, this came out of the study, struggles to put food on the table. And again, has already been mentioned, but 60% of Alexandria's public school students are eligible for free and reduced price meals at school. And then just to remind you of the diversity we have here in Alexandria, 31% of our residents speak a language other than English in their home. And students enrolled at Alexandria City Public Schools represent 134 countries of birth and 113 native languages. So those are the stats. And then just a couple of what I would call facts. Food costs are fungible. So what doesn't get spent on food can go to pay for rent, utilities, car maintenance, gas, prescriptions, a number of other things. Or maybe better worded, ensuring the rent is paid, sometimes the food budget gets slighted. Alive has been in the food business since our beginning, which is 1969, because churches and members in the faith community at that time were helping neighbors, and they were helping them with food, and they saw that they could help more and in a bigger way if they came together. So if you fast forward to today, Alive's food program is still probably one of the best known programs that Alive operates. In the beginning and still today, Alive's food program is 99% volunteer-led and operated. And it's always been able to do that because of a number of partnerships, and really now more than ever, we rely on numerous and varied partnerships. So, Alive's food program consists of what I would say 4 major components. The biggest and probably the one that's best known is called the Last Saturday Food Distribution. It is operated the last Saturday of the month, 11 months out of the year, at 3 sites here in the city of Alexandria. One not far from here at the Church of the Resurrection, one sort of in the middle of the city, or considered in the middle of the city, at Core Kelly Recreation Center, and one at Ladre Senior High Rise in Old Town. And in order to run our last Saturday operation, on that Saturday, we have about 150 volunteers split up at those 3 locations. So even though it's once a month, we do use most of the month to sort of prepare for that, collecting the food, planning, pulling it together, and then the week before actually staging the food at those locations. What Alive does is provides groceries to families and individuals, about 5 days worth of groceries. It's comprised of canned food, cereal, other shelf-stable food, eggs, fresh produce, frozen meat, and the fresh produce and meat we garner through a partnership with Capillary Food Bank. Everything else is donated. If you can picture the way it works, there are literally lines of people here in the city of Alexandria that line up at these locations, and they're very patient, and they have to be patient because in order to distribute the food at these locations, we can only get the food there either the day before or the morning of. So the volunteers need to come in and literally form assembly lines and get the food packed up for individuals and families. And actually, if I use the Church of the Resurrection as an example, if you were to go by there on a last Saturday morning, you'll see the line outside the door. As soon as we're able to open the door, the folks who are getting food will come in, and that church opens up their sanctuary, and the members of the church serve coffee and cookies. And while the volunteers are pulling together the bags of groceries, and then there's volunteers helping to kind of give out numbers and let people come through the line. And when they do come through and they get their bag of groceries, they then can do a stop at where eggs are being given out, and then they can go outside the back of the church, and there's stations literally where they can get their fresh produce, and they might get potatoes and onions, and they'll end up in the side parking lot where they can end up getting frozen meat. And then there's volunteers that are helping them get their food with little wagons to their cars or to the bus stop. So it's a fairly major operation at 3 locations that goes on once a month to reach about almost 2,000 people, around 530 families, that once a month that we do that reaches, that is enough to feed folks for about 5 days. And one of the things that I'll mention, sort of another reason for the line and for why we can do it fairly inexpensively, is that we do draw down USDA food through the Capital Area Food Bank. But what happens by doing that is, as the chair of our food program likes to state, and she is a former federal employee, with free government food also comes free government forms. So we have to have every person that gets food has to sign off and give us a certain amount of information. So that adds to the process and to the line. But in Alive's case, that has been a good thing because it allows us to get so much of the free food, and we're able to continue the operation at a very low price. And in that case, in the case of the last Saturday food distribution, folks are welcome to come. We do not take official referrals. They just have to self-declare that they fall within the income range of the poverty level. So as I said, the monthly average is about 2,000 people we serve and around 530 families. Another program that we operate is a home delivery program, and this program serves older individuals who are at home, people with disabilities, and people who are homebound generally, who are really not able to get to the last Saturday food distribution. So we have volunteers who literally take referrals from city social workers, the school social workers, other nonprofits, and we have volunteers who pack the groceries for the the individuals that need them delivered to them. And then and they also get some basically similar food groupings as we give out at Last Saturday. They'll get shelf-stable food, eggs, fresh produce, meat, and then for the home deliveries, we also have bread and milk that go to those. And then, as I said, we've mapped it out for the volunteers, and then we have volunteers that deliver it. Those home deliveries, we average about 150 individuals that we reach, about 72 households a month. We also have a somewhat, in the last year, new program called Community Food Partnerships. And what this is literally Alive is delivering food to other food assistance organizations, or it might be better described, other nonprofits who are serving those in need, but their main focus is not food. And so, yet the people they serve do need food. So Alive is able to provide the food, and then those organizations figure out through their volunteers or their staff how to get the food to them. And this food goes to organizations whose pantries basically are depleted, or they don't have a process or a way to fill them up. For example, we provide food to the West End Food Pantry, which is also just down the street here, Grace Episcopal Church, Meade Memorial, Mount Jezreel, St. Joseph's Catholic Church, Alexandria Recreation and Senior Housing, the Durant Center, Ruby Tucker, Ladre, and then low-income housing, community lodgings, Brent Place. So Alive's role in this program is that we get the food out to them, and then they are able to get it to those in need. And this program was developed because over the last 9 months to a year, we've noticed the numbers at our last Saturday food distribution were down slightly. And although we've not yet 100% figured out why, we imagine that it could be there's a discomfort level of some folks with the changing immigration landscape that maybe they're not as comfortable coming forward. So getting the food out to them in different ways is something that we know we have to continue considering. But the added element of getting the food out to these other places takes care of, that maybe that aspect. But we also know that a last Saturday morning may not be the most convenient time for people who might be holding down 2 or 3 jobs, or who have small children and that sort of thing. So we know that it's good either way to find other ways to get food out into the community. Another program that we have is called the Weekend Care Bag Program, and we provide support to 2 Alexandria schools for their supplemental food items for the weekend backpack program that they do. And we do that in a way, in the sense that we are managing the food center, so we work to let them store whatever food they have for their weekend backpack programs at the warehouse. They use the warehouse to sort it out and to pack the packages, and then where we can, Alive tries to supplement the food that goes into those. And through just those 2 schools, Alive's work in that area is reaching 150 elementary and middle school children on a weekly basis. And then additionally, we have some new partnerships with 2 elementary schools where they have sort of go-get-'em social workers, and we're working with them. We get food to them once a month, and then they, on a weekly basis, are turning around and sending food home, not just sort of backpack type food, but food that they can send home with the children for the whole family. And they're doing that once a week, as long as we can get the food to them, and then they use their staff or volunteers to get the food home to their families. And then finally, the last Alive food program is what we call a welcome bag. And as I mentioned, we have Alive has a furniture program, and our furniture program works every Saturday. And when they pick up furniture, they take the furniture to people who need it, and at the same time, they deliver. They take groceries to the families that they're delivering the furniture to. So. Where does kind of all this start? Well, Alive's been doing all of this in different formats and different ways for 48 years. But as Alan said, thanks to the report that came out in 2014 and some very specific things that were identified, and specifically about the warehouse that he told you about, in October of 2015, that partnership with the city was enhanced and solidified and really strengthened. And now that warehouse stores more food, and it provides staging for more food. It's not a distribution center, because you've heard we have to sort of take the food out into the community. But it has become a place where food can come in and get out quicker. And so Alive currently has volunteers who are there every single day for at least 4 hours where the Packers and the Financial Assistance Program operates. And then we have other food program volunteers that are there. But our overall original strategy was that it would be a great place for all these. There's a number of small pantries that work in Alexandria at many of our congregations and faith communities, and they really have nowhere to store their food. So that's kind of how we envisioned this warehouse. This would be great. Everybody will have a space where they can store their food. Well, sometimes when you come together, with an idea and a coalition, things work, but they work a little differently. And as you've heard, Alive has gotten more strength and ammunition in getting food out into the community. And that's really how the warehouse has been used more. Rather than those pantries having to kind of store the food there, come over and get the food they need, and then take it back to their pantry, Alive is doing more of keeping it there, but then getting it to them. So it's still evolving the way the warehouse is being used, and as Alive over the last couple of years has done more to get food in, it really has served that purpose, that it's a great storing and staging place. So we have a new program where we're doing donations in front of grocery stores on a regular basis, but we also, I'm sure you all participate in, the Boy Scout food drive, the Postal Service food drive, Turkey Trot food drive. There's a lot of food, and especially this time of year, that comes into Alive and comes into the warehouse. And it is Alive, but the reality is Alive is so intermingled with the faith community and with so many partners that whatever we can do to get the food back out is really how that warehouse is coming into play. And so, as I said, Alan alluded to the food warehouse, and then also Hunger Free Alexandria. And Hunger Free Alexandria has really been that opportunity in a short 2.5, 3 years to bring the number of different food pantries besides Alive, because Alive is doing what it's doing, but clearly the work it does is in tandem with a lot of smaller food pantries. And Hunger Free Alexandria is this coalition where everyone comes together, including folks from the city as well as the schools, to talk about what is working, how can we do things differently, where are we not sharing information or resources. We started off with a bang. We had a chair of of Hunger Free Alexandria from Christ Church, Melanie Gray, who is, I think, in the city, the only paid staff person in a faith community whose sole work is outreach. And they do a lot of it, and she did a lot to get the Hunger Free Alexandria effort underway. Currently, it's co-chaired by me and Matthew Gillette from National Community Church, who is with us this evening. And we continue to build on what's been done, and thanks to Nathan's work, to be a bit more organized. And as on your tables you've seen the resources list, to try to continue to make the system that is in Alexandria stronger, and look for ways to do things where we can reach more people and make food more available in our community. In fact, as I wrap up, I just want to say that Hunger Free Alexandria has recently put a little bit of definition on what the coalition does, and it's getting more food to more people more frequently in the city of Alexandria. And what we're continuing to work on and build is data collection, communication, resource creation and distribution, education and advocacy, food distribution, and partner support. So we see this collaboration growing, at least in ways to link and collaborate and share resources, and however often share best practices. So just having the players around the table and being on the same page has really been a big step in the right direction. And the public awareness at an event like this, we realize is also necessary so that we can continue to get more people and more volunteers involved in the process. Thank you.
Before Charlie gets on, thank you. Diane brought up another point that's become more pronounced within the last year, and we noticed this in talks with the Department of Community and Human Services. Kate Garvey's here, she's the director. We noticed last fall that as a result of some discussion, shall we say, at the federal level, families that were eligible for services were not necessarily trying to access those services in town for fear of being highlighted, found out, whatever the term would be. They were not showing up, whether they were eligible for food stamps, whether they're just eligible to get food. They may not be as apt to want to do that because they didn't want to bring any attention to themselves. That's been an ancillary issue in a sense, although it's very much involved with a lot of what the nonprofits in town are doing relative to trying to address those families in need. And the Alexandria Council of Human Service Organizations has been trying to address that as we can. In fact, we'll be looking in January to reconvene around that issue a little bit more and get an update on where things are. But I'd like to turn it over to Charlie Ming. Charlie's from Arlington, and Arlington's been involved in this effort for a long time. And we'd like Charlie to kind of give us, we let him come across the border to try to give us a little bit of information about what Arlington does and the way Arlington has been doing their food distribution. And we, of course, have worked in concert with them in the sense of beg barring and stealing and getting some brain trust, too. So, Charlie?
Thank you and good evening. I'm Charlie Meng, the Executive Director of the Arlington Food Assistance Center. We call it AFAC for short. AFAC provides supplemental groceries to families in need in Arlington County. Last month, we served an average of 2,385 families each week. That's over 5,100 individuals, a third of whom are children under the age of 18. The families we help are those you would expect: the unemployed and the underemployed, folks who are looking for work, but when they find it, it's at $7.25 an hour, minimum wage, and often only part-time. The second group that we serve are the disabled, both in mind and in body. They're the silent folks among us. They try to get by, but on a very simple, low Social Security disability payment. For AFAC, the fastest growing group are the elderly, living on a fixed income, people who bought a house long ago, raised their kids, and are now living out their last years among friends. Unfortunately, their retirement no longer covers all of their bills. Medicine, insurance, fuel oil, and many more no longer add up. These are the families that AFAC helps. I suspect it's not much different here in Alexandria. AFAC was started almost 30 years ago by a group of individuals who saw too many families going without need, a basic need, food, enough food to put on their tables. These volunteers believe that both individual and collective action can make a real difference in the lives of those in need. They believed in a simple command found in the sacred documents of almost every religion and faith. We know it very simply as, "I was hungry and you fed me." Ever since, AFAC has remained committed to the belief that volunteer action can make the lives of the least fortunate better. While AFAC has grown from its first general manager 20 years ago to a staff of 21 employees, we still rely on the help of over 2,000 dedicated volunteers who gave last year almost 50,000 hours of volunteer time. That's the equivalent of 23 full-time employees. Shortly after AFAC was founded, we were joined by 6 congregations, all of whom had small food pantries in their basements. These churches sent their families, their volunteers, their food, and their funds to AFAC. To this day, those 6 churches supervise our Saturday morning distributions. AFAC was started by volunteers and for many years remained an all-volunteer organization. Thus, encouraging volunteerism in the community has been our second mission almost since our founding. We start with our volunteers early on. We've got a family bagging night for young kids and their parents. They make a mess of our warehouse, but they help. Everyone helps in their small way. We have a summer teens program where high school teens fill in for our regular volunteers as they take a few weeks off in the summer. But the core of our volunteers are those men and women, young professionals, the not ready to retire, the retired, the elderly, especially those who refuse to hear the knock of the Grim Reaper and want to help those less fortunate than themselves. We also have volunteers from the developmentally disabled community. They wish to volunteer and have every need to do the same to help others in our community. AFAC also provides community service opportunities for high school students who need to fulfill course requirements. And we have our sons and daughters caught in their youthful indiscretions and assigned community service by our local courts. Without the help of these dedicated and hardworking volunteers, we could not do what we do. They are indeed our backbone. On average, a family visiting one of our 18 distribution sites will receive 40 pounds worth of food each week. The average family in America of 4 needs 145 pounds of food a week to survive. So what we're providing is really only supplemental. But what we do try to focus on are those high-cost items in a grocery basket: fruit, vegetables, proteins, dairy products, and a number of other assorted items. We also provide a selection of staples and a number of miscellaneous items. You know, hunger in America is not the crushing hunger found in developing countries. What we have are families who are forced to make difficult decisions about what they eat and what they give their kids. Decisions that are practical. A box of macaroni and cheese that costs 50 cents will satisfy and fill the stomach of a hungry kid. But that box of mac and cheese is filled with too much salt, too much sugar, and too much fat. In our country, this leads to childhood obesity. And in the elderly, it leads to hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and high blood pressure. What we try to do for our families is help them make better decisions about what they eat and what they feed their kids. One of the great benefits of consolidating the small food pantries long ago is that with the large numbers we serve, we can go to large wholesale distributors to secure volume discounts. The chicken we serve costs 48 cents a pound. The eggs, $1 a dozen, and milk is now $1.05 a half gallon. AFAC will need this year 225,000 dozen eggs. That's the equivalent of a very large bakery. We are now buying 5,000 pounds of chicken a week. It used to be that the donated food we received made up 60% of what we distributed. But as the number of families have grown Donated food now makes up only 40% of what we distribute. Donated food from local grocery stores and food drives brings to AFAC 1.5 million pounds worth of food, with a value of almost $2.5 million. The rest of the food that we distribute, another 3.25 million pounds, we purchase ourselves. Now, when a family comes to AFAC seeking help, we will provide them food. But what we do is we ask them to go to our local Department of Human Services or to one of our other partner agencies. What we want to do is get the family into the system. Because if you don't have enough food, you've got other problems. You've got unemployment problems, housing problems, medical problems, whatever. And at the Department of Human Services, those families can be seen and all of the needs of the family evaluated, and they can get a referral back to AFAC. Now, we also use, we developed a software package several years ago where when a family comes to us, we set up a file in a software. It's a cloud-based software. It'll work on PCs, Macs, smartphones, whatever. And what we do when they come to our doors, we will enter them into our system, send them up to the Department of Human Services or one of our referring agencies where they'll be evaluated. If a social worker at one of those agencies feels that the family will benefit from AFAC services, they can enter our software. As I said, it's cloud-based. They can refer a family to us, and then when that family comes back to us, we issue them a grocery store card that can then be swiped and swiped each of the visits that they make to one of our sites. From that system comes all of our demographic data and all of our usage data and information that's essential to reporting to our county government, to foundations, and to other donors of AFAC. A referral to AFAC lasts 12 weeks, 3 months. Our system will remind the family when their referral is about to expire, and they can go back to their social worker and get that renewed, as long as the social worker believes the family will benefit from our services. The elderly will get a year's referral. There's no reason why we should put individuals whose situation really is not going to change through all of the paperwork of returning back to the department and filling out more paperwork. So we try to reduce that paperwork for them. I want to point out that our client system does not contain Social Security numbers, nor does it contain any information about immigrant status. Social Security numbers, because simply if our system is breached, I don't want to be responsible. But more importantly, on the immigration side, we don't make a difference in who we serve in Arlington. If you are in need of food, we're here to help. I do know, though, that we do serve about 600 immigrant families. Those are the undocumented families. I think the same that Diane has talked about. We've got a lot of families speaking, I think in our case, something closer to 115 languages from, I think it was maybe 128, 130 nations. But many of them are here as refugees and as legitimate immigrants to us. In fact, one of our sites, Claridge House down in Crystal City, houses, it's a Section 8 housing. It houses about half their families are Ethiopian immigrants, and the other half are Russian. standing on lines for Russians and Ethiopians is a very different kind of cultural aspect. And as Americans, we try to just keep orderly lines. So we have a lot of problems down there, to say nothing. Now, we serve about half of our families out of South Nelson Street, where our main warehouse is. And the rest are served at 17 other sites throughout the county. 5 of them are the senior living, low-income senior living sites. Others are in churches, community centers, and in some of our libraries. Besides the County Department of Human Services, there are 20 other partner agencies that can refer families to AFAC. Several congregations, homeless services and domestic violence agencies, the Arlington County Public Schools, low and affordable housing agencies. It is through these safety net organizations that we can make sure that we get to every family that needs food in Arlington County. There are 2 other programs that we support. One is our nutrition program, and that started several years ago when one of our volunteer gleaning teams went over to the agricultural USDA farms at College Park and came back with 4,000 pounds of acorn squashes. Now, I think everybody, well, most everybody here knows what to do with an acorn squash. Cut it in half, fill it with butter and garlic, and put it in your oven at 350. But many of our families have never seen a winter squash. They've seen a yellow squash or a zucchini, but they don't know what to do with an acorn squash. So we started food demonstrations. So we've got volunteer chefs who come to us each morning, prepare what's being served that day, and provide samples along with recipes in English, Spanish, and one of the 4 other languages that we publish all of our documents in: Russian, Ethiopian, French, and Mongolian. We also have a kids camp that tries to teach nutrition to low-income children in one of our local partner agencies. I'm very happy to say that kids camp run at Bridges to Independence last year won a 4-H competition in food nutrition in the state of Virginia, and last month went to the national competitions in Houston, Texas, to the 4-H club competitions there. Another program that we support is the Plot Against Hunger program. Plot provides seeds free of charge to all backyard gardeners, community gardeners, churches, schools, whatever. And all we do is ask that you bring back what you don't need to us. Last year, that was almost 65,000 pounds of fresh fruit and vegetables grown in the fertile soil of Arlington County. In fact, many of the churches and all of the public schools have gardens for us. It's a real great source of fresh fruit and vegetables, particularly in the summertime. It takes a lot of work to run AFAC. This year, we need to raise $3.6 million in cash. We need to find 1.5 million pounds of donated food, and we need the help of those 2,000 volunteers. That's a total of almost $7 million. We get no federal funds and we get no state funds. We do get $527,000 from Arlington County, but that is the only government funds we get, and that amounts to a massive 7% of what it takes to run AFAC. But most importantly, those volunteers work daily to sort and distribute 85,000 pounds a week, almost 7 million pounds of groceries a year. So that's what we do at Arlington. I hope it helps. And I must say that looking into this issue is really important in any community. You know, we all live in two of the richest counties in the United States. You know, in Arlington County, the average income is $116,000. That's right at the top of the bell curve. There's a lot of families on the right-hand side of that raises that average to 116,000. But there's lots of folks on the left-hand side of that bell curve that bring it down, and those are the families that we need to serve. So I want to commend Alexandria for all of your work and for the progress that you've made.
Let's give a round of applause to the panel. We do have some questions, and knowing we don't have a whole lot of time, thank you. I now know we have even less time. But what we will try to do, I think, is at the conclusion of the program, I will take these questions, get them to the panelists, get them answered, and we'll get them to Bob and or whomever and get them on the website for anyone that didn't get their question answered this evening. I think one of the things, there's a favorite quote of mine. It's from W.H. Auden. It says, "We're all put here on earth to help others. What others are here for, I don't know." And I think that kind of sums it up in many ways. But we do have a few questions, and I've tried to group these, and we'll kind of throw these at the panel, and whoever wants to jump up, let me know. There are actually 5 of them here that are almost in the same vein. I'm going to repeat I'm going to say them all because they all kind of flow together, okay? So what's missing in Alexandria regarding ending hunger in Alexandria? Don't answer yet. What are the long-term systemic and or legislative changes that need to happen to do that? Do any of the coalitions have an advocacy arm? It's critical to ask why hundreds or thousands in Alexandria are food insecure and what systemic adjustments might need to be made to help with that. The bigger question maybe is, shouldn't Alexandria and other communities be focusing on the underlying causes of hunger, poverty, homelessness, job insecurity, affordable housing? And lastly, which fits into this, is how do you respond to those people who say, actually, many of these folks are just lazy, they don't do what they need to do, why should they deserve being helped? So they all kind of flow in the same arena. What needs to be done?
Okay.
Alan.
Well, you know, as I said earlier, a lot has been done in a short amount of time. But there's a number of things. Events like this, actually to raise awareness in the city of Alexandria. And no, we do not have an advocacy arm right now. We actually, one of the things we have talked about recently is creating an advocacy arm and actually community awareness. So this is one venue, and we're looking for other venues to do that. There are a number of things that came out of this study, and there's other things. We actually want another study to find out some of the promising and best practices in other communities. So we got to a certain point, and we want to know, how do we go to that next plateau, and how do we do that? So that's one of the things that we're looking for. We've looked at a couple of things so far. The state of Washington actually recently came out with a best practices study that we're glancing at. Montgomery County came out with a food security plan that we're actually looking at. So there's a couple of things we're looking at to try to find out how do we get to that next plateau. But I would say it's difficult moving forward without having at least a part-time coordinator. Everybody's got their own jobs to do. It's all volunteer run. People are diverting their time from their own jobs or from their own lives in order to make things move forward. Having Nathan just demonstrated how important it was to have somebody there 20 hours a week moving the ball forward. And there's a number of things we still need to do. We do know that there are certain things. For instance, we need a large freezer into the food center. We need to look at the transportation patterns inside the city, as Diane mentioned about last Saturday, but it's very difficult to take all that food well, it's not a lot, but at least the amount of food that is provided, and get on a bus and transfer and go across the other part of town if you're at this part of the town in order to get it. So there's a number of issues we're looking at. Council has been available to chat with when we needed to chat with. What we need to do is actually make sure we come back with some harder requests to council. But, you know, we constantly keep reminding ourselves, because we beat ourselves, geez, we have a lot to do. But we also try to remember that in almost 3 years, how far we advanced so far. But we do need to do a lot more.
And I just want to add, I agree with Alan, and certainly having a person that is able to focus on some of the things that we know need to happen or will lay the groundwork. I agree with him. But one of the biggest things that in the short time that Matthew and I have chaired Hunger Free Alexandria, that we have really realized, and I know this is probably just basic information, but there is enough food in the city for everybody. It's a distribution issue. And so we do think we have we're getting most of the players around the table. So, you know, Alexandria, as we know, a lot of things can happen with volunteers. And so until we can, you know, either get the staff person or having somebody who's dedicated and can focus on this all of their time is huge. But in the meantime, I think as long as we continue to try to focus on things like the real basic stuff, then I think we'll continue to make progress. But Alan is very good. He's like the godfather of all of this, in the sense that he's very good at reminding us a lot has happened since that study came out. And sometimes a study is the impetus that gets you really focused on what needs to happen. And a lot has happened, but we certainly have a long ways to go.
Yeah, the one other thing I want to iterate here is on your tables, as was mentioned, there's a listing of food resources. Up until actually, I think in the summer, that precise list did not exist. There were components of different lists. There were like 3 or 4 different lists that exist in the city. None of them were complete. One of the great things about having the committee was to sit down and actually create that one trusted list. And one of the things that committee did was actually set up a process to revalidate that list every 2 months to make sure that it's accurate. So people are now getting accurate information about where they can go for food that really didn't exist before. The other thing, as Charlie mentioned, was healthy food. We did not have a list in the city that said, if you're going to donate food, please donate these types of food because these are the healthiest ones. You know, when you look even at cans of soup, and even sometimes like it says, you know, healthy on it, they have a high amount of sodium in there. They have a high amount of sugar. So we're trying to remind everybody that when you do donate canned foods or whatever, please look at the sodium amounts. Please look at the sugar amounts because, as Charlie mentioned, childhood obesity, many people who are needing the services have health problems, which is, from my perspective, one of the major issues that need to be addressed through this process is making sure we provide healthy food in addition to food.
John, I'd like to just answer that question about, you know, our families being lazy or somehow taking advantage of the situation. You know, I said that we had last month 2,300 families that came to us. I've actually got 4,100 families who have referrals to us. So that means that there is another 1,500 families or so who are not coming to us because they do try their best to work, and we can see it. We can see that sometimes in the beginning of the month, some families will be with us, and at the latter part of the month, they'll come to get food because their money has finally run out. So, you know, nobody wants to get food at a food pantry. You want to go to your own grocery store, get the food that you and your family will eat and will enjoy. So this is a self-selection. These are not lazy people, quite the opposite. They're very hardworking and dedicated individuals, many of whom have 2 and 3 jobs and are trying their best to make a life for themselves and their families here in our communities.
Thank you. The next few questions relate to some eligibility issues. And this is a good one. Of the 13,500 Alexandria households at or below the poverty level, how many of them are seniors? Any idea? Maybe senior services can help with this one. I'm not sure.
I don't have that. I'm sure we can get that.
We will try to answer that question online when we get to that point. Question about WIC. What is the research about how many women, infant, children up to 5-year-olds are using WIC versus what Alive makes up for? And is there an incentive for stores to give WIC benefits in Alexandria? If so, what? And I know this was an issue we've discussed at Hunger Free off and on since the beginning.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that.
It's still one of those areas that we need to pay more attention to. But again, it gets down to making sure that people know about how to get healthy food, and also the issue with WIC is that it's for a short amount of time, and people in need food for a lot longer than the time period for WIC. The process at the food stores are doing well for providing it, but again, it's not enough.
And in the same vein, sort of, are all of the local food programs open to single homeless individuals? It seems many of the programs relate to families or kids, but we're not excluding single individuals, are we?
We're certainly not at AFAC excluding in singles. In fact, many of our elderly are singles. We do not serve the homeless, however. What we do is work with our local Homeless Services Center, ASPAN, and once their clients get into housing, we will serve them. But our foods are really meant to be cooked and refrigerated. So if you don't have a kitchen, we really don't have any permanent service for the homeless.
And Live Food is for individuals and families. In our effort to collect data, that's why I use the term household or families versus individuals, but we serve both.
And actually, on that food resource list, on the back part are listings of meals that are served, whether breakfasts or lunches and dinners. And those, some of the people who actually partake in those are homeless individuals, particularly for the breakfasts or the lunches. So there is an opportunity. And again, that information didn't exist before. Another outcome of the process so far is that Nathan worked with many of the providers of those breakfasts and lunches to actually put together a pamphlet. So if other organizations, churches, others wanted to create one of those breakfasts, one of those lunches, one of those dinners, they now actually have a guide in order to do that.
Okay. And the next question relates to volunteers, or questions relate to volunteers. Do you have, and mostly for Alive or in general, do you have a large turnover of volunteers? How do you engage those volunteers more? And maybe what are some of the things that smaller faith-based communities might be able to do to help?
Okay. Well, Alive, probably because of our history and for how long we've been around and our connection to so many faith communities, we have a lot of volunteers, and there are some who have volunteered for 20 or 30 years and just show up at our locations, our last Saturday food distribution. And but we do have turnover, and so we always need volunteers. We are trying hard to do a better job of knowing which volunteers are actually going to come and which are not, because Alive has just sort of operated where, you know, people showed up because they knew the need was there. But separate, our other food programs, especially the home delivery, we have a very set schedule where we need volunteers every single day, and the turnover is not that high, but we always welcome new volunteers. Typically it's folks who are retired because they're available. And then in terms of the faith communities, I think Hunger Free Alexandria, if a faith community was thinking about getting involved in some sort of food effort or wanted to learn and try to discern how they could get involved, becoming a part of Hunger Free Alexandria is a great opportunity to do that, because we can identify and tell where there are some needs, or some of the people around the table have done some of the things already. So that's probably one of the strengths right now of Hunger Free Alexandria, is we will be very glad to help people get engaged in ways that work for their faith community.
And we're going to close with that, except to say we will get the other questions answered online. We will also provide the list that you have available online. And while this certainly isn't a pitch for donating, if you wish to donate to this cause, you can, and we'll put that information online also. In order to make it work, the more support that it garners, the better the opportunity for it to be successful. So if we could, one more round of applause for the panelists, and we'll let them get off stage, and we'll turn it back over. We're not going to get off stage.
Well, we got to make sure we thank the Godfather. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alan, for really getting that report, putting it together. Diane, inspirational, truly inspirational. And Charlie, a great set of examples and good ideas. And I'm looking back there, and I saw the mayor taking notes. So this is good. Really beautiful information, well presented. We thank you very much. This is a matter of looking at different examples and different approaches to solving hunger in Alexandria. And truly, there are a variety of foodstuffs back there. We hope that gets back to the right place, and we think Diane could probably keep her eye on that. To all of you who came tonight, to all of you who came for the first time tonight, we welcome you. We thank you for being here. Consider joining Agenda Alexandria. January 22nd, we're going to talk about the disruptive economy in Alexandria. Are we ready? Looks like an exciting program. Add a new site. We'll publish the information along with the questions we didn't get to, and the information you found on your table. We'll get it up on the website. Thank you so much for being here, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the program. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, good job.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for making it all the way up here.